to begin our journey in a state that has more stories to tell than sun-filled beaches, more mysteries than ships that visit her harbors. While many come here to work on their tans and enjoy the sparkling waters, most are drawn to the state for a more inexplicable reason. Here, we'll explore some of the more mysterious stories, unexplained happenings, and explore Florida's creepier venues beyond the beach. First off, I'd like to start talking about the paranormal, one of my most interesting topics, I'd say, because it is interesting. I find it fascinating. I have found it fascinating for many, many years. I started off really young learning about the paranormal, and really it snowballed from there. Unsolved Mysteries, the X-Files. You really couldn't get enough of it back when I was growing up. With all the tragedy of the Sunshine State, all the deaths that have occurred here, how old the state is, we even have the oldest city, St. Augustine. There are bound to be a few tales of ghosts, spirits, things that go bump in the night, and things we just can't really explain. I'm here to tell you about a few of those tales, some that I've researched and some that I've really never experienced for myself, but are out there, and quite frankly, I enjoy hearing them. I enjoy reading about them. I enjoy doing the research on people who have seen and heard these things that just fascinate me to no end. Here are a few of those tales. Another tale comes from Montverde, Florida, down a lonely little road named Magnolia Creek Lane. Now, reports come of shadow people, and a legend has it that in the 1890s a passenger train derailed, killing about 200 people. There's no evidence of such a train accident, but the strange tales still persist. Now, I've done my research on this, and it is a small little lane, and it could be where a train used to run. It looks as though it's one of those rails to trails projects, but it's not very well upkept. Now, we do have evidence of there being a recorded railway near there, but it runs north of the road, and records show that there were no passengers trains running in that area. It was all freight trains at that time. Still, nevertheless, the legend has kept up its speed, so to speak. Strange happenings still happen, and reports by locals of the area say that there are sounds in the woods that just go unexplained. Another tale comes from Montverde, Florida, down a lonely little road named Magnolia Creek Lane. Now, reports come of shadow people, and a legend has it that in the 1890s a passenger train derailed, killing about 200 people. There's no evidence of such a train accident, but the strange tales still persist. Now, I've done my research on this, and it is a small little lane, and it could be where a train used to run. It looks as though it's one of those rails to trails projects, but it's not very well upkept. Now, we do have evidence of there being a recorded railway near there, but it runs north of the road, and records show that there were no passengers trains running in that area. It was all freight trains at that time. Still, nevertheless, the legend has kept up its speed, so to speak. Strange happenings still happen, and reports by locals of the area say that there are sounds in the woods that just go unexplained. Next is a legend that is a little closer to home for me. This legend comes from Fort Walton Beach, and it tells of ghost wolves, a pack of 3 to 5, if not more, that run alongside and even along the water under Brooks Bridge. The tale says that every third Wednesday of the month, at exactly 12 a.m., a pack of wolves emerges, runs across the water, and disappears down the bay. Locals swear to see them. I have yet to get out there to try this, but all photographs that they take show blurry images and shapes, and yet tales still persist, and this legend goes on. Moving right along, just about every state has tales of ghost hitchhikers, the ones who were in tragic accidents or died nearby, who are just looking to try to hitch a ride home, maybe. Well, Florida has what they call the I-4 Dead Zone down in Sanford. And this is what is called one of the deadliest roads in America. It's a span of bridge that crosses Lake Monroe. And since 1963, there have been over 2,000 accidents, including during its construction when Hurricane Donna, back in 1960, took an unexpected turn and headed straight for the spot where it was being constructed. Mysterious fogs, ghost hitchhikers, and cell phone crackles, static, a literal dead zone for some cell phones, occur here. And the cause? Well, according to legend, there were 4 graves that were on the land that it was purchased from back in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And those graves were promised to be moved when the highway was built. They were never touched. So, legend persists that those 4 angry spirits, if not more, end up causing so many accidents on that road. Even in 2004, when Hurricane Charley came forth, it followed a nearly exact path through that area that Hurricane Donna did back in the 1960s. Next, we'll move over to St. George Island, down towards Port St. Joe. This spooky little area is quite old, not nearly as old as St. Augustine, but it has its fair share of history. Down here on St. George Island, there's been the specter of Old Red Eyes on Kinsley Plantation Road. Now, since 1970, this specter has been a regularly sighted visitor to the old Spanish moss-covered Plantation Road. Many say that this is the ghost of a violent slave that raped, brutalized, and killed other slaves before being caught and hanged by his fellow slaves. Now, this being the South, that story would be very viable, but there's no historical evidence to support this story. Many believe, though, that the real culprit behind these red eyes seen floating around the trees are simply possums in the trees, with headlights reflecting off of them. But the legend persists because this is the South. It's a story that reflects many other haunting tales around this area. And it just goes to show, imagination can run wild. And finally, we come to one of the oldest cities in Florida. Saving the best for last. One of my favorite places to go and visit is St. Augustine. There's plenty of legends around the lighthouse. The ghost stories tell of Peter Rasmussen, one of the previous lighthouse keepers, who you can't really see, but you can smell his signature cigar in various places around the lighthouse. Another lighthouse keeper, Joseph Andrew, passed away. But this time his wife was so heartbroken over his death that her spirit can be seen looking out over the top of the lighthouse, rising far above the city, searching out and watching the horizon just like her husband once did. Now, there are many spirits in St. Augustine, but around the lighthouse, the last two I want to tell you about are two young girls, daughters of a renovator named Hezekiah Pitty, who died in the 1800s when they were playing on one of those old carts that brings tools and supplies to a renovator from the bay. They were playing in it, as children are to do, and it broke loose. The brake didn't work, and it sent them careening into the bay, where I've been told it flipped over and they drowned because they were unable to escape. Many people still hear their childish playing, giggles, calls to come and play with them. Lots of little pranks in and around the lighthouse area. I only know that it's a very historic and spooky place, and one I love to go to. Stepping down from the lighthouse, we come to the Huguenot Cemetery. Now, the Huguenot Cemetery is located right across from the historic city gate and was built as a Protestant burial ground between the years of 1821 and 1884. While it's common to spot orbs and mysterious lights in the cemetery, these can usually be easily explained away by even the most novice of ghost hunters as dust particles or water droplets in the air. One of the more common sightings is of a 14-year-old girl ghost, one who died of yellow fever. She was just left outside the cemetery, never claimed. No one came to even explain who this girl was, and she was buried in a pauper's grave. But a more famous ghost is Judge John Stickney, and though he is no longer a physical resident of the cemetery, he still wanders the cemetery because during the removal of the body, his golden teeth were stolen by two thieves. His body was removed because his children wanted his body to be closer to them as they lived in Washington, D.C. His spirit is said to be a shadowy apparition in a black hat. Out from the cemetery, we head to one of the most imposing edifices in St. Augustine, an old Spanish fort by the name of Castillo de San Marcos. Here, there's the spirit of a headless Native American chief, Osceola, who was betrayed after his death by a good friend of his, a doctor, who beheaded him post-mortem to keep his head as a memento. Unfortunately, at the time, Native American body parts, especially the heads, were considered valuable trophies. Another tale tells of two lovers, Manuel Abela and Dolores Marti, who disappeared mysteriously after the colonel, Dolores' husband, discovered the affair between the two lovers. Years and years and years later, their bodies were discovered when a cannon fell through a weakened floor, dropping into a secret room which held two skeletons that appeared to be sealed inside. These skeletons appeared to be the two lovers, who the colonel had said one had gone home to Spain and one had been reassigned to another island. Death is a subject that elicits fear in the general populace, fear of the unknown and fear of this life ending. I accept death as a part of life, and in this acceptance, feel myself fascinated by the spirits of the deceased and their stories, and the science that tries explaining the causes of the paranormal, the guesses and the theories on why one becomes a ghost. We have all these questions of why, and yet we are still searching for that explanation, still in pursuit of that mystery. Even dogs, cats, and virtually any animal have been recorded as spirits, further deepening the mysteries and questions we have into our own afterlife.